You have spent so much of your life trying to outrun your own thoughts. You distract yourself with noise, movement, screens, voices, anything that keeps you from sitting still long enough to hear what lies beneath your surface. Because you know that silence is not empty. Silence is full of everything you have avoided. And the moment you stop moving, it rises. First like a whisper, then like a storm. The mind you ignore becomes the mind that governs you. The pain you repress becomes the script you live. You think you are free because you do what you want, but you do not question why you want it. Every impulse you chase, every desire you cling to, every fear you obey. These are not decisions. These are echoes. Old lessons wired into your nervous system. Childhood conclusions replaying as destiny. You think you are thinking, but you are remembering. You think you are choosing, but you are repeating. You want peace, but you worship distraction. You crave clarity, but you refuse to sit long enough in the dark to let your eyes adjust. You want healing, but you fear what healing demands. You believe peace comes from fixing your life, fixing your circumstances, fixing other people. But deep down you know the truth. The external is only a mirror. You do not need a quieter world. You need a quieter mind. And that means turning inward willingly, even when everything in you wants to run. That is where shadow work begins, not as a spiritual trend or a performance of depth, but as a quiet agreement with yourself. I will no longer abandon what hurts. I will no longer exile the parts of me that do not fit the image I show to the world. I will no longer punish myself for being human, because the shadow is not evil. It is not darkness for the sake of destruction. It is the closet of rejected truths. It is your anger that was never allowed to speak. Your sadness that was never given a witness. Your longing that was mocked before it learned how to breathe. It is every version of you that was told to disappear for the comfort of others. And you obeyed. You learned how to play a role. You learned how to be acceptable. You learned how to become the version of yourself that would not be abandoned. And slowly you forgot the rest. You forgot that authenticity is not gentle. Real growth is not graceful. Becoming whole is not a beautiful revelation. It is a dismantling. You do not ascend into your higher self. You fall into it. You do not become enlightened by escaping your wounds. You bring light into them. You sit with your anger until you realize it was not violence. It was grief. You sit with your anxiety until you realize it was not weakness. It was a plea for safety. You sit with your loneliness until you realize it was not emptiness. It was the echo of self-abandonment. And the quiet mind you seek does not come from suppressing these voices. It comes from listening to them until they no longer need to scream. But listening is not passive. It is not romantic. It is not aesthetically pleasing. It is raw and slow and uncomfortable. You will feel restless. You will want to run. Your mind will throw distractions at you like flares in the night. You will wonder if the stillness is helping or breaking you. But you must understand, the mind resists what it does not control. And silence is not something the mind can dominate. Silence belongs to the soul. It is not loud. It is not persuasive. It does not argue. It waits. It waits for you to stop performing. It waits for you to stop defending. It waits for you to finally run out of strategies and simply say, I don't know who I am beneath my history. I don't know who I would be without my armor. And that is when reflection becomes rebirth. That is when stillness becomes revelation. That is when the quiet mind opens, not as an escape, but as a return. A homecoming to the parts of you that never stopped calling your name. So breathe. Let the noise settle. Let the old self crumble. You are not disappearing. You are reassembling. There comes a moment when the silence stops feeling peaceful and starts feeling dangerous. When stillness stops being soothing and becomes suffocating. That is the threshold most people never cross. Because silence is not always serenity. Sometimes silence is confrontation. And when the outer world goes quiet, the inner world begins to speak. It does not speak gently. It does not ask for permission. It does not wait for the right time. It demands to be heard. It asks you questions no one else dares to ask. Why do you always need someone watching you, approving you, validating your existence before you feel real. Why do you panic when there is nothing to do, no one to impress, nowhere to run? Why does rest make you restless? Why does peace make you uneasy? Why does love make you suspicious? You think you are calm when things are stable. But true calm is when things are unstable and you do not collapse. True calm is when the storm arrives inside you and you remain a witness instead of becoming the wind. But you do not trust your own mind. You fear your own body. Every discomfort feels like danger. Every quiet moment feels like drowning. That is because you were trained to avoid rather than observe. You were told to shut down rather than sit with. And so your nervous system became a soldier instead of a sanctuary. Always ready for war, even in moments of peace. Always scanning for threat, even when the danger is gone. That is why your mind keeps replaying the past. That is why your chest tightens when someone raises their voice. That is why your body flinches when someone offers love. You think you are broken, but you are simply conditioned. And what is conditioned can be unlearned. But not by force. Not by positive affirmations layered on top of unhealed wounds. Not by pretending that you are healed while the shadows beneath you ache to be acknowledged. You must learn to sit inside your pain without judging it, without solving it, without labeling it dramatic or irrational or embarrassing. You must learn to treat your mind not as a battlefield but as a home where every part of you has earned the right to exist. Even the versions you regret. Even the versions you hide. The shadow is not your enemy. It is your exiled guardian. It carries the parts of you that once protected you but were punished for their method. Your anger that stood up for you before you learned how to use your voice. Your jealousy that revealed your unmet needs before you had language for longing. Your pride that held you together when humiliation tried to dismantle you. These parts were not evil. They were misunderstood. And healing is not taming them. It is welcoming them back to the table. It is telling your younger self, I understand why you did what you did. I understand why you shut down. Why you lashed out. Why you kept quiet. You were surviving. But now it is time to live. And living is not constant comfort. Living is emotional honesty. Living is nervous system safety. Living is inner stability that does not depend on external conditions. And that requires devotion. Not to perfection, not to progress, but to presence. To staying with yourself no matter what rises. Even when it burns. Even when it shakes. Because there is a moment, after you have sat long enough with your shadow, when the fear turns into familiarity. When the ache begins to soften. When the voice inside you says not I am broken but I am becoming. And that is when the quiet mind arrives, not as silence, but as surrender. You are no longer fighting your thoughts. You are no longer negotiating with your past. You are no longer begging for peace. You are allowing it. The world around you may still be loud. People may still misunderstand you. Life may still bring chaos. But within you there is space. There is room for all that you were and all that you are becoming. Nothing to prove. Nothing to hide. Only breath. Only presence. Only you. There is a strange quiet that settles in once the storm inside you has exhausted itself. It is not peace, not yet. It is the space between breaking and becoming. The moment after the collapse but before the rebuilding. A suspended breath. A long exhale that has not yet turned into an inhale. You feel hollow but not empty. Weightless but not free. As if your soul has taken off its armor and does not yet know whether to rest or to rise. This is the liminal place. The threshold of transformation. Most people never stay long enough to pass through it. They rush to fill the silence with distractions. They decorate their brokenness with productivity. They rebuild themselves too quickly, stacking beliefs and identities and routines like bricks over cracks that have not yet closed. But you are different. You have chosen to pause, to linger inside the uncertainty, to let the emptiness echo until you understand what it is asking. This is the hardest part of all healing. Not the breaking, not the crying, not the confronting, but the waiting, the stillness, the not knowing. Who are you without your habits? Who are you without your fears? Who are you without your story? You were taught to define yourself by your wounds. You learned to introduce yourself with your pain. I am the one who was abandoned. I am the one who was betrayed. I am the one who overthinks. I am the one who feels too much. But now those labels sit loosely around you, like old clothes that no longer fit, and you are not sure what to wear instead. So you stand there, barefoot in the space between identities, letting the silence become your witness. There is no rush here. Time does not move in a straight line. Healing does not follow a schedule. There is no finish line, no moment when someone places a crown on your head and declares you whole. Wholeness is not an arrival. It is an allowance. It is not you becoming someone new. It is you learning to exist without resistance, without constantly bracing for impact, without constantly performing for safety, without constantly analyzing your every emotion as if it were a code to solve rather than a language to listen to. Your mind will try to interfere. It will whisper that you are wasting time, that you are falling behind, that you should be productive, improving, evolving visibly. But listen closely to that voice. Hear the panic in its logic. It is not your wisdom speaking. It is your conditioning. It is the part of you that was taught that worthiness must be earned, that stillness is laziness, that softness is weakness, that existing without output is dangerous. Breathe and let that belief dissolve. You were not born to be a machine of survival. You were not born to constantly brace against the next impact. You were not born to live only in response to life. You were meant to experience spaciousness, to feel your own existence without needing to justify it, to sit in the center of your being and say, "This is enough. I am enough," not because of what I have healed, not because of what I have achieved, not because I have mastered my shadow, but simply because I am here, breathing, aware, present. You do not need to understand yourself completely in order to be worthy of peace. You do not need to fix everything before you can rest. You are allowed to be unfinished and still deserving of gentleness. So stay in this liminal space a little longer. Let your new self form without force. Let the next version of you arrive without chasing it. You do not need to resurrect the old self. You do not need to invent a new one. You simply need to witness who emerges when you stop trying to control the process. And in that witnessing, something settles. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, like light returning slowly to a dark room. Not blinding, not overwhelming, just enough to see your own hands again. Just enough to remember you are still here. Just enough to realize that even in your stillness, you are becoming. There comes a moment almost imperceptible, when the heaviness inside you loosens. It does not vanish. It does not explode into light. It simply softens, like frost melting beneath the touch of morning, like a clenched fist remembering how to open. You do not rise with triumph. There is no surge of motivation, no cinematic breakthrough. Instead, there is a subtle willingness, a quiet readiness to move again, a gentle curiosity about what might come next, not out of desperation, but out of possibility. For so long you have lived in survival rhythms, tension first, breathing second, anticipation before presence, analysis before feeling. But now, slowly, your body begins to release its old choreography. Your shoulders lower without command. Your breath deepens without instruction. You begin to inhabit yourself rather than simply endure yourself. This is not joy yet. This is not clarity yet. But it is peace in its earliest form, the kind that does not shout its arrival but hums beneath your ribs. It tells you quietly, without words, that you no longer need to brace for impact. You do not need to prepare for disappointment before allowing yourself to hope. You do not need to assume loss before trusting stability. You do not need to shrink before anyone asks you to. Stand inside your own skin with the tenderness of someone who has nearly lost it before. Walk through your own mind like a sacred corridor instead of a battlefield. When doubt returns, and it will, do not argue with it. Let it speak, and let it fade. When fear rises, and it will, do not fight it. Let it tremble through you and pass like weather. Emotions are not enemies to defeat. They are movements of energy asking to be acknowledged and released. You do not heal by silencing them. You heal by listening without obeying. You heal by saying, I feel you, but you are not all of me. You heal by remembering that you are the sky, not the storm. And from this newfound stillness, you begin to choose differently. Not out of force, but out of resonance. You start drinking water not because you're fixing yourself, but because it feels kind. You rest not because you've earned it, but because existing is reason enough. You speak softly to yourself, not because you are reciting affirmations, but because harshness no longer feels like truth. You begin to make decisions as if you are on your own side. And life, sensing this shift, responds. Not instantly, not dramatically, but steadily, subtly, like the sun inching across the floor each morning, finding new corners to illuminate. The world begins to meet you with the softness you extend to yourself. Not because it has magically changed, but because you finally let it. You stop demanding chaos as proof of reality. You stop requiring pain as confirmation of effort. You allow life to be gentle without suspecting deception. This is the ascent, not a climb, not a conquest, a rising by allowance, a floating upward as the weight falls away. Not because you forced it, but because you finally stopped gripping it. And you realize, maybe for the first time, that peace was never something you had to seek. It was something that had been waiting beneath the noise all along. Now you arrive at the stillest part of yourself. The place where the rush of thought has slowed enough for you to notice the rhythm beneath it, the pulse of life that continues quietly, even when the world demands noise. Here, there is no need to perform, no expectation to explain, no requirement to prove anything. You are not the sum of your choices, your fears, or your mistakes. You are the witness of all of it. And as the witness, you begin to understand that your worth has never depended on what you achieve, who approves of you, or how others measure your presence. It has always been intrinsic, silent, unshakable. You make a quiet vow to yourself, not as a declaration to the world, but as an intimate covenant with your own being. You vow to honor the shadow and the light alike, to let the parts of you that scream and shiver and hide have space without judgment. You vow to meet your thoughts with curiosity rather than fear, to let your feelings flow without suppression, and to recognize every impulse as a messenger rather than a threat. You vow to stay present when the mind wanders into old loops of guilt, regret, or anxiety, and to guide it gently back to the sanctuary of now. This is your sacred practice. Not grandiose, not performative, not visible. A commitment that exists entirely within you, sustained by attention, patience, and compassion. You understand that this vow is not a one-time act. It will be tested. Shadows will return. Doubt will knock. The world will continue its relentless chatter. But in the quiet mind, you have discovered an anchor. A place where storms can pass without pulling you under, where tension can loosen without dissolving your sense of self, where you can observe the rise and fall of thoughts as clouds moving across an infinite sky. And in this space, you finally know freedom. Not freedom from challenge, but freedom within it. Not freedom from emotion, but freedom to feel fully without losing yourself. Not freedom from the world, but freedom to inhabit it with presence, clarity, and calm authority over your own inner landscape. The quiet mind has taught you patience, resilience, and the subtle art of being. And when you open your eyes, when you move, when you breathe, you carry this stillness as a companion. Not as a shield, not as a performance, but as a deep, abiding recognition. The woman or man you are, in all your complexity, is enough. You do not need to prove it. You do not need to fix it. You do not need to escape it. You simply need to honor it. And in honoring it, you finally experience the self you were searching for all along, whole, calm, and quietly radiant. The woman or man who knows their worth does not chase, does not clamor, does not perform. They simply are. They simply witness. They simply exist. And in that simple existence, the mind becomes quiet, the heart becomes open, and the soul, long silenced, finally begins to speak.